you really did pick a great day to be here because today is nothing like yesterday. It's true. This Sunday is nothing like last Sunday. Obviously, if you showed up, the doors were locked. Absolutely. But I'll tell you that I was really disappointed last Sunday. We've been so looking forward to getting to know you. We've been so looking forward to hearing your story and you getting a chance to hear some of our story. And I know I'm being a little bit vulnerable here because I don't even know you guys yet. But I missed you last weekend. I was like, I don't know what to do with myself. It's only my second Sunday, and I'm already playing hooky. I was in another church on Sunday morning. I was sweating, and it's all right. We've been looking forward. And a lot's happened since yesterday. A lot's happened since last Sunday. This Sunday isn't at all like last Sunday. And there's a word for that. I'm going to throw this out there. The word is epoch. Everyone turn to your neighbor and say epoch. Yeah, some of you are skeptical. You're like, Daryl, that's a bit of a reach, isn't it? We're calling this an epoch? All right, stay with me. I'm going to define it for you. An epoch is a distinctive period in the history of something. That's it. It's just a distinctive period in the history of someone or something. So if you've ever prayed, God, things just got to give, you're actually praying for an epoch, for an epochal moment. You're praying for something to change. If you've ever experienced something that changed everything, then you've experienced something of an epoch, an epochal moment, a moment in time when people look back and they say, well, that was the day, wasn't it? That was the moment when everything changed. You can call it what you will, but I actually believe in turning points. Yeah, I'm a person of hope. I believe, I count on, I pray a lot for turning points, and maybe you do too. And here's the thing, repeatedly in the scriptures are these curious stories of God moving in a specific way at a somehow significant moment to accomplish something special. That happens all the time. Luke 22, in the story of Good Friday, it says, when the hour had finally come, it's like all of history had been hurtling towards that moment. I know what you're thinking. Yeah, but that's Good Friday, Daryl. It kind of was, all of history kind of was hurtling towards that moment. It's true. Good Friday is a great example, right? It's more than just a moment in history. It really was a singularity, wasn't it? It was a great example of when God was saying, no, the time is right now that I need to do something different. There are actually countless examples in the scriptures of God moving in specific ways, significant moments to accomplish something special, right? Some of you are thinking, yeah, Daryl, like Esther, right? Esther, absolutely. If you know the story, Esther found herself in an epochal moment. Do you guys remember the story of Esther? It's a story with a soundbite, and the soundbite is this: Esther, if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And here comes, and who knows, but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. You guys remember that phrase, for such a time as this. There are actually dozens of them in the scriptures, moments where God moves in specific ways, in specific moments, because he wants to do something special. Here's what I want you to think about today. Learning to recognize the movements of God in time is actually more important than some of you think or might have imagined to serving God's purpose in your particular time, in your lifetime. Does that make sense? How do you do that? All right, how do you do that? How do you learn to recognize when God is up to something in your life or in the lives of the people around you? Working in a particular moment, maybe doing something specific in a specific situation in your life. Is anyone going through a specific situation in your life? You're like, I could really use God to do something special right now. Yeah, we've all felt that, haven't we? I'm a believer in that kind of thing. How do you learn to recognize that? Let me say this first. Maybe you're here today and you're not even sure how God fits. You're not even sure. If you're sure that there's a God, you're not sure he cares. Maybe there have been just too many moments in your life where God was conspicuous, or you felt like God was conspicuously absent. And so you have a hard time believing that God still makes moments for people. If that's you, I get it. There really are all sorts of moments in my life where I look back and I have more questions than answers. Like even after years of time have passed, all sorts of unanswered moments. And so I'm with you, but I'm betting on this first thing, this first idea I want to share today. I'm kind of betting that this is going to work in my life to help me do better at recognizing maybe God at work. If you want to get better at it, recognizing the movements of God in the seasons of your life, I think Psalm 90 verse 12 has an idea. Those of you who love to follow along, go ahead and do that. The Bible app, your Bible, please feel free. Many of them will be on the screen, but not all. Psalm 90:12 says, "Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom." It's a prayer. It's a prayer that you can pray. And the practice of looking long, of numbering your days is actually the first step, it says, to growing wisdom, or is an important step to growing wisdom. What's wisdom? Wisdom is the ability to find meaning, to pull insights out of the stuff that's going on in your environment, right? That's wisdom. Pray Psalm 90. Ask God to help you learn to look farther out into the horizon, because the wisdom that you get from looking long, from numbering your days, will actually help you, I think, better recognize when God's doing stuff closer in the foreground. Does that make sense? The better you get at looking long, the easier it is to recognize when God's doing something curious up close in the foreground. So if you want to see God move in your life, you might want to start practicing this, and maybe this is a different kind of prayer than you're used to. Maybe you haven't prayed this before. God, I suppose I need to learn how to number my days better. You know, maybe I need to learn. Maybe I need that kind of wisdom in my life. Ask God to help you learn to number your days. So here's what I'm going to say about that. Don't forget to step on the scale, as it were. When he's like, "Oh, Daryl, I don't want to go there." Don't be afraid to step on the scale, to get an honest appraisal of where you are today. I think that's part of praying this prayer. Where am I today, God? For some of you, today can be a day one. Yeah, I hung out with Margaret yesterday, and she's ready. She's like, some days you need to start over, just to have a day one again, right? A reason. You need permission just to say, if this is a reset, God, I'm open. So maybe this is a day one for you. Don't be afraid to step on the scale again. Ask God then to clarify, maybe bring into focus what you want to be when you look long in the future. I want you to start to imagine, who could I be in the future again? And then, as far as it depends on you, this one's free and I'm still chewing on it, so you're allowed to push back. As far as it depends on you in this process, even though you're looking long, I know all of you strategic thinkers are like engineers. You're like, this is my favorite verse, Daryl Buckle. Like, number our days, set a plan. We can conquer the world. Rome wasn't built in a day, but I know how they did it. You love this, right? As far as it depends on you, monitor trajectory more than you measure progress. You know why, right? Your financial advisor tells you this all the time. Don't worry about the short term. Look long. You know, you're on the right trajectory. You're doing the right things. Don't worry about the things. Your mama told you there'd be days like this. There'd be days like this, your mama said. And so you know that it's better to monitor trajectory than to measure progress. I just say that because you know some days it won't feel like there's any progress. Daryl, I have this dream for the future, and nothing seems to happen. That's why you start. You guys know this, so I don't have to say it out loud, but I'm going to anyways. There are a lot of things about the future that you just can't know. I don't have a red phone that I pick up and God tells me exactly what's going to happen. I don't. As far as it depends on you, all the best we can do is to look long and then get on a trajectory towards that vision. That's the best we can do as we look into the future. If you want to run a marathon, I know this for a fact. You just have to practice running to the next mailbox. Really. Like, you got to start somewhere, and that's a great place to start. It's that simple. You want to get out of debt, you make a budget, and then this is going to blow some of your minds. You know you have to limit your spending in something, right? If you want to get out of somewhere, you got to limit your spending on something. You want to go to MIT, you probably should pick up your math score a little bit. These are all obvious, right? You got to start somewhere. Start somewhere small. You want to have a happy marriage? Don't elbow your husband. He's sitting right beside you. If you want to have a happy marriage, listen, maybe you've heard this before. If the grass starts looking greener at the other side of the fence, that's how you know it's time to water your own lawn. This is how we do it. This is what making sure you're on the right trajectory is. Even if you don't see the results yet or the progress, you've got to monitor your trajectory. That's what numbering your days means. It's about asking God to give you a vision for your life in the future. And I know not every group I will ever talk to will find that easy. Because I know sometimes the stuff in your life makes it hard to look with hope into the future. But I want to challenge and encourage you to start to maybe hold on to the belief again that the best days are ahead. For you, for your life, for this church, certainly, the best days are ahead. And that's a prayer you can pray. All right, God, then you need to teach me how to start numbering again. You need to teach me how to number my days differently again. I've been really encouraged to find out that the Meeting House, as a church, as an organization, has actually been doing this. We've been asking God to give us a fresh vision for the kind of church that he wants us to be. And I'm new, so I'm listening. I'm excited to find out that the Meeting House still wants to be a church filled with people that are passionate about introducing spiritually curious people. I love that phrase. I know so many spiritually curious people. We just want to still be able to introduce spiritually curious people to this Jesus way of life, this Jesus-centered life. I love that. I've been encouraged to find out that we still want to, and we recognize that we need to be a church and a people who are humble because we're broken. We can just admit that, right? We're humble because we're broken. We're hopeful because I'm going to show my age here, and some of you will recognize this song. We're hopeful because his strength is perfect when our strength is gone. That's just true of us right now, right? It's true of us, but you can be hopeful because his strength is perfect. And we're ready. We are. We know that the Jesus way of life is a self-emptying, cross-shaped kind of life. We know it's going to cost us to live the Jesus way, and we're ready. I've been so encouraged to hear that. The Meeting House as an organization, as a church, has been praying and thinking about what are the kinds of structural changes that need to happen to help us get on a better trajectory towards a vision like that. And what that means is we're numbering our days. We're saying, if we start here, start now, what are the steps that we need to take to be on the right trajectory? And I can't wait to share more as I learn more about what that might look like. So that's the first thing, right? That's the first thing. Teach us to number our days. Pray that prayer, pray differently. There's a second thing that I want to do as a primer for how do we do this? How do we better learn to recognize God at work in moments of time? And this is it. You can try this one on. The practice of honoring the rhythms of God. That's what I put for the second one. It's a practice to honor the rhythms of God in your life. What does that mean? All right, Genesis 8 says, as long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. Do you spend much time thinking about that? Because I don't. I don't think about that other than complaining about the weather, because I'm Canadian. I don't spend time thinking about how good are you at recognizing the seasons or rhythms of your life. Some of us are better than others. Exodus 20 is where God says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You probably recognize that. 6 days you shall labor and do your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God, a day for rest. Another one in the Old Testament, every seventh year, you remember, the Israelites were to set their slaves free. Every 7 years, you're supposed to set all your slaves free. You're supposed to cancel your debts and let the land lie unplowed or unused. That was neat. That's kind of a neat 7-year rhythm. If you're keeping score, there were 7-year cycles. Some of them were sort of annual seasons marked by, the environment or the weather or whatever. And all those things impacted the work week because you do different things for your work week when it's seed time versus when it's harvest time. These are rhythms that God has sort of written or highlighted that are obvious if you're a farmer. And of course, every week there's supposed to be a rhythm of work and rest. People are maybe surprised to learn that God has actually designed our lives to be governed by seasons, natural rhythms. Yeah, we don't spend a lot of time thinking about that. That's actually how God wired us. People are just at their best when they grow within this framework. Athletes know it. if you're a athlete, endurance athlete, you know that the rest days are like at least as important, or maybe more so than the actual training days are. This is a thing that they know. It's every bit. Farmers, this is obvious. Farmers know that the thing, maybe the factor that impacts the harvest most, is maybe how the seed time went, maybe how successful or how the seeding went. They know all those phrases. You got to make hay when the sun shines. And there's all sorts of them. Farmers live their lives on the rhythms of life, and many of us don't. People are blessed, I think, though, when they learn to honor the rhythms of God, whether that's daily work and rest or weekly Sabbath. How about the seasons of feasting and fasting? Some of you said, Daryl, for a long time we've been in a season of lament. We felt like if there's a banner written, if there's a sign on our door, it's you can enter, but we're in a season of lament. This is a season we've been in. God actually wired us for seasons, and it's okay. It's good to lean into those seasons. It's a good place to start. So if you're thinking about praying, God, teach us to number our days, this is the secret. If you're thinking about what it would be for you to pay more attention to the rhythms in your life, this is the secret I want you to sort of think about today. Sometimes when we don't honor the rhythms of God, we find ourselves getting out of step with what God wants to do in our lives. And maybe this is obvious for you, maybe it's not, but has anyone ever learned this the hard way? Like me. Anyone ever been sidelined by sickness after a season where you're pushing too hard? Right? Do you know, like, brides and grooms, like, always get sick right after the wedding? Because the time up to the wedding is just chaos. And Max, I'm sorry. It's craziness. And so you're probably going to get a cold and be sick the first couple days of your honeymoon. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. It's just kind of how that works, though. If you're not careful to live by rhythms, sometimes those seasons where you feel dry, those seasons where you're like, am I depressed? I don't normally get depressed, but I'm just feeling, sometimes it's this. Not always. Sometimes this is it. It's because you haven't been leaning into the rhythms that God designed for your life. Maybe God wants you to shift your posture. This is a long explanation. Here's why. There's one more that's much worse, and it's kind of why we're, maybe a little why we're talking about this today. If you don't build into your life rhythms that God created to be part of your life, it is actually possible to become numb to the pull of God as he leads you in life. Remember, that's what we're talking about. Learning to recognize God moving in a particular time, in a particular way, because he wants to do something. You get numb to that pull of God in your life if you're not sensitive. And I want to be sensitive to God leading in my life. And I'll tell you, people have been questioning my sensitivity to God's leading lately. Because as we've been sharing the exciting news that we're moving to Waterloo to join the staff team at the Meeting House Church, I have had exactly 2 responses, kind of a 50-50. As you can imagine, the first response is, wow, that's great. Like, wow, we're so excited for you. That's the first response. Can you guess the second response? Really? Is that obvious to you? The Meeting House. Why the Meeting House? Here it comes. Why now? Right? Why the Meeting House and why now? Listen, there are times in our lives where God says in a single moment, get up and go, and I don't ever want to be numb to those times. I always want to be sensitive to God leading, even into scary things in my life. And I hope that's something for you too, because I'll tell you, when they ask that, I'll tell them. I tell them why I love the Meeting House Church. And I tell them why maybe I think God has asked us to come now. You guys ready? Let's do a case study from the scriptures. Can we do this? This is a guy who was really good at recognizing God moving in time. And so very quickly, we'll do a case study. 1 Kings chapter 17. Some of you have already guessed it. We're talking about the prophet Elijah from the 9th century BC. He was a living legend. If you know, you know. And if you don't, that's who Elijah was. Living legend. At the end of chapter 17, Elijah raises a kid from the dead. It's cool. It's pretty cool. Yeah, 2 Kings, Elijah is taken from this world without even dying. I know what you're thinking. It's like spooky, right? Yeah, I'm just saying the truth is out there. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. Elijah was somebody who understood how God worked in specific ways in specific moments. Chapter 17, verse 1 says, "Now Elijah." Everyone say, "Now Elijah." You guys are good sports. I'm a little surprised by that. That's awesome. "Now Elijah the Tishbite said to Ahab, as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word." If you know the story, you know that's exactly what happened, right? The rain stopped entirely, and for the first few days, people loved Elijah. Absolutely. They're at the local coffee shop, and people would come in and greet the barista and be like, "Man, amazing weather we're getting, right?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's so beautiful," right? Small talk, all that stuff. A couple weeks later, of course, people are starting to appreciate Elijah less and less. Maybe the small talk is done for whatever reason at Elijah's word. And this is one of those stories that just stretches your mind. For whatever reason, at Elijah's word, God ushered not just Ahab, the tyrant king of Israel, but the entire nation of Israel. Everyone living in that region. The good guys and we're innocent, right? We would be the good guys who are innocent, and Ahab, the tyrant king of Israel. Everybody gets ushered into the same season of drought. Have you ever experienced a drought? Some of you maybe have visited like some of the African droughts you see on TV, like terrifying, or there's parts of the U.S., farmers devastated. Maybe you've experienced nothing like that. Maybe you've experienced the metaphorical kind of drought, a season of lack. A season of lack. You're like, "Yeah, I've been through a drought." Seasons of stress and uncertainty. Sometimes we all go through seasons of fear, right? Fear of what might happen in the future when all the things that you used to take for granted are no longer guaranteed, right? And so you've been through seasons like that. Maybe you've experienced seasons of waiting. That's what a drought is, actually, right? It's a season of waiting. No matter what you're doing, in the back of your mind, you're always wondering, "I wonder when this thing will break," right? I wonder when, surely the rain will come someday. And until it does, you just work and you wait. That's all you can do is you work and you wait. Some of you have been waiting for a long time for God to come through. I don't know your story, but I've been there enough times to know it's pretty predictable in any crowd, even one this size. There's somebody here who's been waiting for a long time for God to come through. What do you do when you're waiting? You guys already know. You look long. You do. You just practice looking long. It can be really discouraging to look short, and because then you just have to sit in your misery, right, and ruminate on how bad things are. But if you can look long, that's a good way to spend your waiting. And just hold on to the vision. Until God tells you otherwise, just hold on to the vision. And you keep in step. That's the other thing. You guys know this. With whatever rhythms that you've built in your life, you keep doing those things. And that means every morning you set your alarm and you wake up in the morning and you say a prayer to the God who governs your days. You do this. You do all the things you know to do because that's the only thing you know to do. So you wake up and you beg God, come through. Like today would be a really good day for you to come through. You read the Bible app because you got to do something. You got to find a way to get God and his word into your life. You read the Bible app. You just invest in those things that you think might help you move on a trajectory into a better future than today. I'm going to try and make today better than yesterday. That's it. And the last thing you do, in the back of your mind, you just make sure you're always ready, because at any time you're not yet Elijah might turn into all right, get up and go, Elijah, right? The red light will finally turn green. And you're waiting for that today, and it might be today. The gun will sound, and so you want to be ready any day for God to make that turn, that change in your life, and you got to be ready to act. Whatever that thing is God might ask you to do, you got to be ready to act. Elijah, like this happened repeatedly in his life. God says, all right, here's what I want you to do right now, right next. This is it. This is what I want for you. And as he waited for God to move in the timeline of Israel, right? The misery that they were all stuck to together. We're all in this together. It's a drought. He also got to walk faithfully to God in the timeline of his life and see God moving pieces in people's lives in the midst of a corporate season of waiting. It's a fun story. I hope you'll reread it. In verse 2, it says, "Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Get up, Elijah, leave here, turn eastward, and hide in the Kerith ravine east of the Jordan. You're going to drink from the brook. I've instructed ravens to supply you with food." This is sounding great, right? So he did what the Lord told him to do, and God did what God said he was going to do. There's water, there's food. Even in a drought, amazing. This is great, right? Until verse 7. Verse 7 says, "Sometime later." Everyone say sometime later. I'm sorry to keep doing this to you, but I'm like, you're like losing patience with me. I get it. It's just that this story has so many of these time-bound references. When you reread it, they sort of jump out at you a little bit. Sometime later, the brook dried up. Oh, man. Like it was going so good for a while. And it dried up because, if you didn't forget, there's a drought, right? Because there had been no rain in the land. Verse 8, "Then the word of the Lord came to him." So here's what I want you to do. "Go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there. I've instructed a widow to supply you with food." God is moving in people's lives and providing in the midst of this thing. And I'm going to let you to read that story on your own this week about the widow. Every time God said go, Elijah went. Every time Elijah went, he got to experience the God who makes moments. Yeah, and maybe you feel like God doesn't do that near enough in your life. But he is still the God who makes moments, which means he comes through. He provides, even miraculously. That is, until chapter 18. Chapter 18, verse 1, after a long time, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do it again. After a long time, what happened? In the third year of what? You haven't forgotten, have you? There's a drought. Yeah, it's not just a drought. It is the drought that has come to identify this epoch that they're in. Have you ever gone through a period of time? Like when I say the last 3 years, like some of you are thinking COVID, right? The last 3 years. You don't have to say what it's about, but you get it. It's come to define this period of time. Some of you aren't thinking about COVID. You're thinking about other crises. In the third year of the drought that had come to characterize the season that the whole nation had been experiencing day in, day out for 3 long years, out of nowhere, God came to Elijah and said, "Go present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land." And so that's what he did. Remember Ahab? It says he did more evil in the eyes of God than any other king before. Ahab, who had been spending the last 3 years hunting down Elijah, he's like, "You caused this drought. I'm taking you out. This is it." And I don't know what changed. I don't know what straw, broke, what page turned that marked finally the turning of the page to a new chapter. I don't know that. We don't actually know. We just know that the word of the Lord came, and it was finally time. God was going to fulfill a promise that he had made years ago. He was going to send rain. Do you guys remember this story? It's familiar to many of you. Elijah challenges people who had been sitting on the sidelines for a bit. How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. That was how it starts. And then you guys remember the brouhaha, the hubbub, the fuss on Mount Carmel. You guys remember that? The rumble from down under. I'm sorry. You guys remember that? Like it was a big confrontation or whatever on Mount Carmel. We don't have time to tell the whole story, but I'll summarize it because I want to pull out just one detail. Like Elijah builds a fire pit, essentially, on Mount Carmel, rebuilds this fire pit, digs a trench around it. A massive crowd shows up, friend and foe, both kinds, massive crowd, climb the mountain to be in the stands to witness this brouhaha. It's kind of like the Greatest Showman. Elijah's like setting it up, dig a trench around the fire pit. And he's like setting up this cool thing that's going to happen. And you remember what happened? 3 times Elijah asked them to fill 4 jugs of water. Do you guys remember that? You guys remember they're on a mountain in a drought that's lasted 3 years? Where are they going to get water? Do you guys think about that? The only water they had is the water they brought with them. Right? And they're probably thinking the first time, no, this is okay. Like, I think this is going to be cool. So yeah, I can share some of my water in this drought. I can share some of it. They're probably thinking this is going to be fun. The second time Elijah asks for water, they're thinking, it's a long walk home, Elijah. It is hot. Like really? They go for it. Every time he asked for more water, which was literally life to them in that moment, it probably got a little more scary and a little more exciting. But more and more people, even if they weren't really ready to admit it, were starting to believe that maybe God was up to something in that moment, that God was going to do something incredible. But for that to happen, because Elijah's in there, it's going to require an incredible amount of sacrifice, right? There's no room for spectators in the miracles of God. There's only participants. So all these people that thought they were just going to watch and see God, they're like, no, I need you part of this story. I need you to be part of this story. And so they did. For some, a remarkable demonstration of faith. For some, it was just a risk of trust. All right, Elijah, but I'm telling you, don't mess this up. And of course, it ends unmistakably with God revealing himself. And after that, you guys remember the story. Elijah, turns to Ahab and says, Ahab, you're looking a little peckish. You should go sit down. Maybe have a little something to eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain. I just love that line. In the midst of this drought, Elijah saying out loud, there is the sound of a heavy rain. And before a single drop had fallen, Elijah could hear it. It's like he could hear it coming. And he climbed to the top of the mountain, or at least further up to the mountain. It says he bent down to the ground. He put his face between his knees. You guys know that's not just a posture of humility. Because Elijah, he looks confident on the outside, but he's scared. This is a prayer of desperation that he prays. And he goes to his servant. Go and look towards the sea. He's got his face to the ground. Go and look towards the sea. And the servant came back and said, there's nothing there, Elijah. So he prays again. He's like, God, did you not hear what I just said? He prays again, and he tells his servant, go and look towards the sea. And his servant came back, and he said, there's nothing there, Elijah. You know, this story totally changes. You have to imagine the tone of his servant's voice. His servant the second time might have said, I'm sorry, Elijah, but there's something there. Right? He maybe was feeling for Elijah. He might have been, there's nothing there, Elijah. Like his sense of humor after 3 years might have been gone. Maybe he was feeling jaded and discouraged and frustrated and upset. And Elijah keeps asking for more. And Elijah keeps asking, they're like raising the stakes and the challenge. They're traipsing all over, right? So you have to imagine this. I don't know which one it was. I just know 7 times Elijah said, go back, go back, go back, look again, go back. And then finally, the 7th time, his servant comes back and says, Elijah, you aren't going to believe this. And Elijah's like, oh, good. Oh, good. He says, there is a cloud as small as a man's hand rising from the sea. And so Elijah jumps to his feet. And he says, you go tell Ahab he had better giddy up and get off this mountain. Oh, yeah, by the way, you should also tell them, don't forget to close the barn door because there's a storm coming. It's a good story, right? It's a good story. Worship team, come on up. As they do, nobody likes droughts, right? Nobody likes the seasons of dryness or the seasons of waiting or the seasons of heartache or the seasons of hurting. But I truly believe this. Those who learn to look long, right? Who ask God to help them look long, who decide they're going to believe that there is a better day ahead, that the future is some of their best days, will actually start to see the person that God is creating them to be. I do believe that. When you look long as a person of faith, God will show you what's coming, some of what's coming. Those who persevere in defiance, that's what perseverance is. It's defiance. It's defiantly embracing cruciformity when what I really want to do is pity party. That's what it is. Those who persevere. They get to see God moving in their life. They are pursuing the call of God on their lives, even though they don't know what it's going to look like all the time. And those who are ready to go when God says go, and ready to give when God says give, and ready to hope even before they see it on the horizon, there's a cloud beginning to swell, right? You might not see it yet, but at just the right moment, God will bring it to light. Amen?